What's up YouTube, it's Ryan from AnnihilatorMTG here, and I'm back again with some more Modern. This week, we're going to be playing the ever-popular Crashing Footfalls. Much like its sister deck, Living End, Crashing Footfalls has been prevalent in the format ever since Modern Horizons 2 dropped. I already played Living End on this channel and quite liked it, so let's see if Footfalls is up to the task. For those who are unaware, the foundation of these builds is the Cascade mechanic, specifically on the cards Shardless Agent and Violent Outburst. Whenever casting one of these spells, we begin to flip cards off the top until we hit a spell that costs less than 3 mana. Coincidentally, if you build your deck in such a way where there's only one spell that costs less than that, you're always guaranteed to hit it. In this case, that spell would be Crashing Footfalls. This enables us to flood the board 8 to 10 power at a time, all the while playing the tempo game. Speaking of which, unlike Living End, which has deck building restrictions in the form of cycling, Footfalls is able to play a myriad of interactive spells. Those include Fire and Ice, the Petty Theft portion of Brazen Borrower, Prismari Command, and Fury, to name a few. You'll notice that half of these spells are either creatures or can become a creature, while the other half is capable of dealing direct damage to any source. This adds an incredible amount of flexibility to our build, and subsequently is much less fragile than the Living End counterpart. It is worth noting that I'm making a slight concession for budgetary reasons. You'll notice in the sideboard a complete lack of Endurance and Force of Vigor. Both of these cards are amazing inclusions to any sideboard that can support them, however, you'd be wrong to say that the deck cannot function without them. If you do plan on taking this list to a major tournament, I highly suggest considering your options first, as these changes are far from ideal. With that said, I'm super excited to try out this build, so let's not waste any time here and head straight into the first match. Alrighty, looks like we found our opponent. Best of luck to you, my friend, and this hand seems excellent. Definitely keeping this. Let's get things started with a Scalding Tarn and see what they're playing. They jam a Misty Rainforest. That appears to be it. We'll crack our fetch and get a Steam Vents. Then we draw a Misty of our own. Let's play it. On our end step, they crack their fetch for a Breeding Pool, only to cycle a Curator. Living End is going to be an interesting matchup. Our combo is a little more straightforward, but the actual spell Living End destroys us. Either way, they play a Scalding Tarn. Let's crack our Misty Rainforest, grabbing a Breeding Pool. There's a Footfalls. To preserve life, we'll play a basic forest, then cast our Shardless Agent, cascading into a Footfalls. It resolves, so we get a couple of Rhinos. Including the Shardless Agent, we have 10 power on board. Now we just have to dodge a Cascade on their side. On our end step, they crack their Scalding Tarn for another Breeding Pool, cycling a Curator and a Street Wraith. They play an untapped Steam Vents and evoke a copy of Grief. There goes the Footfalls, then the Grief dies, and as expected, they cast a Shardless Agent of their own, cascading into a Living End. That'll wipe our board and give them a ton of power. If they didn't have the Grief, I'd be inclined to continue, but this is way too much to deal with. Alright, so in this matchup, we can approach sideboarding in a more all-encompassing sort of way. With that in mind, we'll be making a ridiculous amount of cuts. That'll include 2 copies of Dead Gone, the Seasoned Pyromancers, our full play set of Prismari Commands, and 2 copies of Fury. That way we can bring in 2 copies of Klothys, the full play set of Leyline, and our full play set of Mystical Disputes. Looks good to me. No Leylines in the opener, but this hand should be good enough. We'll start things off with a Sulfur Falls. Don't really have to worry about anything on turn 1. They play an untapped Breeding Pool and evoke a Grief, weirdly enough taking the Force of Negation. If they're going to go out of their way to take a redundant piece, then I'm actually really confident. As the Grief dies, they cycle a Curator. Hilariously enough, we draw another Force, making that Grief excessively pointless. Let's jam our Mountain. They untap and cycle another Curator, passing straight away. In a matchup like this, if you miss a land drop, it's basically over. To make things even worse for them, we draw a Breeding Pool. Let's play it. We'll hold off on the Violent Outburst until it's their turn, but we don't even make it that far as they scoop it up. That was a weird game, but I don't think we need to make any changes to the sideboard. Let's try it again. Alright, so this hand could work, but it feels a bit too honest, so we'll mulligan. This one just feels kinda worse. Still no Leyline, but going down to 4 seems a bit too far. We'll keep, then ship both the Dispute and a Shardless Agent. They lead off with a Misty Rainforest. We draw another copy of Fire and Ice. Let's play the Mountain, that way we can maximize the chance to draw another land. During our end step, they crack their fetch, grabbing a Steam Vents, but choosing not to cycle anything. Here comes a Botanical Sanctum. Oh nice, there's another land. Let's play a fetch. Then on our end step, they cycle a Waker of Waves, bidding an Architect. We'll hold priority on their upkeep and crack our fetch, grabbing an untapped Breeding Pool. That way we can cast Ice on their Steam Vents. Again, Again, they choose not to cycle. Regardless, we get another land, keeping things interesting as they evoke a Grief, no doubt taking the Shardless Agent, yes indeed. Then they play a Sunken Ruins. We draw a copy of Mystical Dispute. Let's play and crack our fetch, finding an untapped Steam Vents. And now their chances of actually resolving a living end is very slim. Up next, they play a Spirabluff Canal and pass straight away, drawing a Fury. There's no reason to flinch, so we'll send it back. On our end step, they flash out a Brazen Borrower. While we could easily counter this, us having access to Fury makes that far less tempting. It resolves. They play a Scalding Tarn and attack immediately, taking our life total down to 11. After damage, they hardcast an Architect. We'll let this resolve. With both of these creatures on the board, our Fury is just incredible. Oh man, and we hit an island too? Now we don't even have to evoke it. Let's play our island and cast the Fury. As it resolves, we'll target both of their creatures. They're gone. Tapping out against Living End is dangerous, but since they did the same, they've put us in a situation where the only time they can cascade is when we'll have access to Force of Negation. They untap and do nothing. We draw another Mystical Dispute. Let's attack with our Fury. That'll take them down to 13. On our end step, they cycle a Waker of Waves. Little surprised they didn't do that before damage, but that's fine. Binning a Street Wraith. Aw man, and they crack their fetch as well. The only reason they should be doing this is for a living end, but they choose a tapped Breeding Pool. They untap and pass once again, drawing Fury number 2. Let's attack. They're at 6. During our end step, they flash out a Subtlety. This is weird. I guess we'll just dispute it. The spell fizzles, and they scoop it up. GG's opponent. Alrighty, looks like we found our opponent. Best of luck to you, my friend. And this hand is not great. Let's try it again. This should be fine. We'll ship a land. Let's get things started with a Misty Rainforest. They play a Triome. During their end step, we'll crack our fetch for a Stomping Ground. Then we draw Murktide Regent. I don't expect to be casting that very soon, so let's just play our fetch and continue to wait. They play a basic island and nothing else. We'll continue to thin out the deck by cracking our fetch for a Steam Vents. There's a basic. Let's play the Harbor, then cast our Shardless Agent, cascading into a Footfalls. I expect this to be countered, but it actually resolves. Ah, that explains it. They evoke a Solitude, exiling a Rhino, then they cast Ephemerate. That takes care of the second one as well. Then on their next turn, their Ephemerate comes back with a Rebound, blinking the Solitude yet again. Our board is toast. After that, they play a basic Forest and add their companion to hand. Drawing a Fury, let's play an island, then we'll cast a 4/4 Murktide Regent. Up next, they play and crack a Misty Rainforest, finding themselves a Temple Garden. Then they cast a copy of Utopia Sprawl, followed by an Omnath. That'll resolve and replace itself. We draw Mountain, perfect. Let's play it. Then we'll hardcast our Fury, sending 4 damage to their Omnath. It dies, then we'll swing in for 4. They're at 13, and now we wait. On their next turn, they cast a Yorion, exiling the Solitude. Then they play a Misty. Once they hit their end step, their Solitude comes back, exiling our Fury. That's annoying. Or not, we draw another one. Let's cast it straight away. This won't be able to deal with their Yorion, but the Solitude dies all the same. Time for combat. Let's swing in. They're at 9. Then they crack their fetch, getting a Triome. They cast a copy of Wrenn and 6. Normally I would be inclined to counter this, but without Omnath, I'm not sure it matters. Upticking straight away. Then they play and crack a Misty, finding another Forest. Here comes Utopia Sprawl number 2. Interesting, they cast a Time Warp. Since this is their last card, we might as well force it. Unfortunately, we draw another land. Let's play it. Then we'll attack with the team. If they block the Murktide, they'll be able to kill it, but take more damage. Whereas blocking the Fury will cause a trade, but leave the Murktide unanswered. They choose the Murktide, so that'll take them down to 1. On their main phase, they uptick, and that's about it. Let's crack our fetch for Steam Vents. Drawing a Footfalls, oh well, we'll suspend it, then attack with our Fury. That leads to a trade, and now it's a battle for time. Well, that's really bad. They cast an Omnath. That'll resolve, replacing itself in the process. Then they jam a fetch, gaining some life and upticking their Wrenn and 6, hitting another land, and I think we've seen enough. Sideboarding in this matchup is going to be interesting. We have a ton of different options, but I don't think we should pursue them all. With that in mind, let's cut 2 copies of Fire and Ice, 2 Prismari Commands, and the 2 Dead Gons. That way we can bring in both copies of Klothys and the full play set of Mystical Disputes. Yep, looks good to me. This hand is a little slow, but it has a ton of potential to just combo off, so we'll keep. Let's Let's start things off with a basic island, that way we can avoid thinning out the deck. They play and crack a Misty Rainforest, finding themselves a basic, then they cast a Utopia Sprawl. We draw another Misty, perfect, let's play one of them. Up next, they play a Flooded Strand and nothing else, so no Teferi, that's always good. On their end step, let's crack our fetch for a Steam Vents, then we draw a Breeding Pool, might as well play it. They have the mana available for interaction, but we have to cast the Shardless Agent either way, cascading into a Footfalls. In response, they crack their fetch for a basic island. Shockingly enough, everything resolves. Geez, and they just scoop it up, their hand must have been terrible. That was a tale of two games. Although it didn't last very long, I think I'm happy with the changes we made. Let's try it again. On the draw, this hand is a little slow, but the Petty Theft might just save it. Think we'll go for it. They lead off with a Flooded Strand, no turn 1 play. We draw a Forest, let's jam our Scalding Tarn. Up next, they play a tap Stomping Ground and nothing else. What happened to them? Their game 1 was so strong, but this is kind of underwhelming. Either way, we'll crack our Scalding Tarn for a Steam Vents. There's a Force, that's about as good as it gets. Let's play a Breeding Pool. So with a Force in hand, we're protected from Teferi, and if they don't have one of those, our Footfalls is almost guaranteed to resolve. They untap and pass straight through, that's not good. Drawing another land, let's play it, then we'll hold up our Outburst. They found a land, it's a basic forest. On their end step, let's cast the Violent Outburst, and that'll do it. GG's opponent. Okay, looks like we found our opponent. Best of luck to you, my friend. This hand should be fine. Even if we stall on 2 lands for a bit, we have ways to sort of function while we figure things out. Either way, we'll keep. They get things rolling with a Blackcleave Cliffs into a Thoughtseize. That's an iconic start. Unfortunately for them, this hand is somewhat Thoughtseize proof. Regardless of what they take, it doesn't really affect us all that much. They go for the Force. We draw Stomping Ground. Excellent. Let's play an untapped Breeding Pool. That way we don't give them any extra information. Then we'll suspend our Footfalls. With all the mana we'd ever want and enough redundancy to survive multiple pieces of hand attack, this hand feels perfect. As is tradition, they play a Blackcleave Cliffs and cast an Inquisition of Kozilek. There goes a Shardless Agent. Drawing a Forest. Think we'll just play a Stomping Ground and send it back. They untap, play a Swamp, and that's about it. We draw Fury. Let's jam the Forest. Then we'll cast our Shardless Agent, cascading into a Footfalls. Everything resolves. Beautiful. Up next, they play an untapped Stomping Ground. Okay, so we're facing Jund. Speaking of which, they cast a Tarmogoyf, continuing to draw mana. Normally this would be an issue, but having access to a castable Fury is super nice. That won't be till next turn though, so let's just play our basic mountain. Then we'll attack with the Rhinos. They choose to block, which is just what we wanted. Before damage, let's cast our Violent Outburst, cascading into a Footfalls. While this is good, what we're really here for is the boost from the Outburst. Our Rhinos are now 5/4s. We trade with their Goyf and bring their life total down to 11. Alright opponent, let's see what you got. No way, they cast a Maelstrom Pulse? Jeez, I completely forgot about that card. That'll answer all of our Rhinos. Then they cast a Lightning Bolt, targeting our agent. As effective as that turn was, us having access to another Footfalls in the wings is kinda backbreaking. The spell resolves. Then we draw a Brazen Borrower. Let's play our fetch, and since we have access to Petty Theft, I think we should hold off on the Fury for now. Continuing to fight the good fight as they play a Ravine and cast another Tarmogoyf. On their end step, we'll Petty Theft the Goyf. Then they cast a Terminate, that's fine. We'll crack our fetch in the meantime, grabbing a Steam Vents. We draw Brazen Borrower number 2. Let's swing in with our dude. They're at 7. As expected, they replay their Tarmogoyf and jam another land. I think we got this one, so let's flash out the Borrower, hitting another copy of Violent Outburst. No need for that. Let's just cast the Petty Theft, and they scoop it up. Nice. Generally speaking, when playing against Jund, we really want to avoid helping them win the card advantage war, so with that in mind, we'll cut the forces. That way we can bring in a 2-2 split of both Blood Moon and Klothys. Looks good to me. This hand seems decent. We're not thrilled about the 2 copies of Footfalls, but we have what we need. To no one's surprise, they lead off with a Blackcleave Cliffs into a Thoughtseize, discarding a Footfalls. Here's hoping they don't have a Surgical. We draw Steam Vents. Let's play and crack the Misty Rainforest, grabbing a Stomping Ground. Then we'll suspend the remaining Footfalls and send it back. Up next, they play and crack a Bloodstained Mire, finding themselves an Overgrown Tomb. Then they cast a Tarmogoyf, drawing a Pyromancer. Think we'll just play another fetch and continue to wait. On their main phase, they play a basic Swamp and cast a Liliana the Veil. Alright, this is about as Jundy as it gets. Upticking immediately. We'll discard a land. Then they attack us for 2, taking our life total down to 15. Before our next turn, let's crack our fetch for a Breeding Pool. We draw Prismari Command. Because they can Edict us, I think we'll just play our land and hold up the Outburst, keeping things rolling as they play a Wrenn 6, upticking to get their fetch back, then they do the same for their Lily. Let's bin the Pyromancer. On their end step, we'll cast our Violent Outburst, cascading into a Footfalls. Then we draw another one, nice. Let's take the opportunity to attack their Lily. They block with a Goyf. Before damage, we'll cast another Outburst, hitting a Footfalls and boosting our Rhinos, that's 2 down. They uptick their Wrenn 6, then play and crack a Bloodstained Mire, this time getting a Swamp. Here comes a Bloodbraid Elf, cascading into a Scavenging Ooze. During our upkeep, we get some more Rhinos, drawing a Fire and Ice. Let's cast our Prismari Command, targeting their Ooze and drawing 2, and it looks like they've had enough. GG's, opponent. And there you have it, these Cascade decks are really something else, and specifically with this build, the flexibility makes dealing with us so much more difficult. Attacking our payoff cards alone isn't enough, and if nothing else, it's a testament to the strength of things like Fury and Brazen Borrower. Okay, so I've got a pretty huge announcement. Ever since the Infect mechanic became a thing the world had to deal with, I've unfortunately been cut off from some of my loved ones who live outside the country. Since the last time I've been able to see them, it's been well over 2 years, and as you can imagine, dealing with that has been impossibly difficult. Luckily, or at least I hope, I will be able to travel over the next 2 to 4 weeks and see them. Unfortunately, as some of my longtime viewers know, editing these videos takes a ton of time. Because of this, I am sad to say that I'll be taking a hiatus from the channel until I return. As I mentioned before, that shouldn't be any more than 4 weeks. It makes me kinda sad because working on this channel and hearing from you all has been a true pleasure, and I mean that. But honestly, the idea of being able to see my loved ones again is the only thing on my mind anymore. So I hope, at least for the time being, you can all remain patient during this time off. Regardless of that, I want to personally thank each and every one of you who has ever showed me any support. You are all wonderful, and this channel only exists the way it does because of you. So for the last time, or at least for a while, stay safe out there and have a good one.